A black woman is busy wiping down tables in a rundown diner. Sweat soaks her apron, a testament to her steadfast belief. Never turn away from someone's pain. Meanwhile, across the street, a man in a Bentley observes her every move and watches a boy in a wheelchair by her side. In that tiny moment, the waitress doesn't realize she's opening a door to a transformation that reaches to the very roots of her life. Can nameless kindness awaken a conscience that has grown cold? Subscribe to the channel to continue following these thought-provoking stories. Serena Carter, 32 years old, had lost count of how many times she'd finished her shift with aching legs and sweat soaking her uniform's back. The floor of Lexington Diner was slick with rainwater tracked in by customers, mixed with streaks of grease dripping from the old sandwich press. Her calloused fingers still bore smudges of oil, sometimes so hot they burned. But that was part of life, the long days when she had no choice but to keep moving forward. Outside, the downpour fell as if the sky itself were weary, casting cold, heavy sheets of water across Lexington Avenue's cracked sidewalks. Around midnight, the diner was left with only the clink of porcelain spoons and the soft hiss of the aging coffee machine. Serena was wiping down the last table by the window when she caught sight of a tiny figure in the rain. It wasn't the boy's faded, tattered red jacket or the rusted wheelchair that stopped her. It was the way he hunched over, hands trembling, eyes fixed on the street as though if he looked up, something precious would vanish forever. Without a second thought, Serena tossed the rag aside and hurried outside. The wind slapped her face, but she didn't slow down. Kneeling before the boy, her soaked hair flying wild in the gust, her eyes softened, asking no questions, hesitating no longer. Her hand, cold as ice, rested gently on his, and she guided his wheelchair back inside. Inside, the diner felt like another world. The scent of toasted bread mingled with the rich aroma of melting butter and a hint of char from the ever-ready coffee pot. Serena steered him to a table by the heater, where the glow of the lamp blurred into a warm halo. She draped a clean napkin over his shoulders with hands so gentle it was as if she feared touching his fear. Without a word, she returned to the kitchen, accustomed to banishing the gnawing hunger few dare to name. She grabbed a still warm sourdough roll, sliced it evenly, and toasted it until the cheese melted into stretchy golden strands. A bowl of tomato soup warmed on the stove, stirred just as her grandmother had taught her whenever winter approached. When she placed the plate before him, the boy's eyes widened. He stared at the sandwich as though it were a miracle, never having known anyone to serve him a proper meal. Serena said nothing. She merely slid the napkin closer and sat across from him. No words were needed. Pity wasn't offered. It was simply human to human, an unassuming act in a world too often indifferent. The boy took a small bite, and in that instant, the tension in his face melted away. The cheese, warm and fragrant, stretched on his lip like a comforting promise. A flicker of surprise danced in his eyes, and Serena couldn't help but smile. She had seen that look many times before in those who had almost given up on kindness. He ate slowly at first, then more quickly, as if afraid someone might snatch away his meal at any moment. Serena said nothing. She leaned on her elbow, listening to the rain drum against the window and to his steadying breaths across the table. In a world that routinely looks the other way, Serena still believed in moments like these. She didn't know his name, nor why he sat alone in the rain at night, but that didn't matter. For her, acts of kindness carried no conditions. Sometimes a warm sandwich and someone willing to listen were enough to keep a soul from slipping beyond rescue. Serena wiped her hands on her apron, glancing out the window, The rain still fell, but inside the diner, the chill had lifted. The boy had nearly finished his sandwich, his chin smeared with tomato soup, his little legs swinging beneath the table. His tired expression had softened, the defensive posture, a stance no child should know, had eased. And for the first time that night, he managed a small smile. Serena returned his smile, not because of anything grand, but because she knew her small gesture had touched a heart. Outside, gusts still roared over the overhang. Cars sped through the night, and life went on in its hurried, distant rhythm. But inside, where the lamp's glow played across a worn apron, and the boy's hand still warmed by soup, something had quietly shifted, small but profound enough to reach the part of us we thought too cold to feel. The boy's name is Daniel. His voice is soft, as if each syllable must leap over invisible barriers before it can be heard. He says his father is coming to get him. Though no one asked, he offers this vague excuse, perhaps for himself, perhaps for the woman standing before him, whose gentle eyes cannot hide their doubt. Serena glances outside, where the rain still pours, flooding the glossy black road. She sees no figure, no headlights flickering to signal anyone's approach, only emptiness and streaks of blurred light smeared across the asphalt. The way Daniel clutches his frayed blanket tightens her heart, not because his thin jacket is insufficient, nor because his skin is pale with cold, but because he curls inward, as if accustomed to bearing everything alone, accustomed to waiting for someone who will never come. His small hands grip the blanket's edge, as though it alone keeps him upright in this cold world. Serena says nothing. She asks no further questions about his father. She has met too many children just like him. She is used to the guarded gaze of children raised in neglect, that watchful look, eyes drifting toward the door, both hopeful and defensive. It is a look that chokes you with the realization that they have learned not to expect too much. Serena cannot recall how many faces like this she has encountered over the years of serving tables, yet each time, that same weight settles deep in her chest, like a taut rope finally fraying. Daniel eats quickly. He speaks no more, yet every gesture speaks louder than words. His hands are clumsy but urgent, as if afraid someone will snatch away his meal before he can finish. Serena sits across from him, her chin propped in her hand, attentive to his every move. She remains silent, only staying there, offering a presence of calm, because she has learned that sometimes a child does not need questions, but to be seen fully, accepted, even when they say nothing. And then she witnesses that tiny miracle. Daniel's eyes, once panicked, begin to soften. The tension on his forehead unwinds as he bites into the final piece of sandwich, and something inside him seems to ease. No more wariness, no more rigid posture as if he is about to be sent away. Only a boy, simply a boy, finding a fleeting peace. Serena watches quietly. She has seen too many fractures appear in silence, wounds that make no sound yet harden into habits, like Daniel's instinct to keep the world at bay, like his inability to wait with full trust. And because of that, this moment, a simple meal, a patient adult who refuses to leave, becomes impossibly precious. She does not know what brought Daniel out alone in the freezing rain. She does not know whether his father truly exists, or if the name is just something to clutch. But she knows the feeling of a child waiting in despair. Serena was once that child. As the diner's lights dim and the aroma of soup lingers in the air, Serena understands one truth. Kindness need not be grand. It only needs to be timely. A fleeting moment, a person who refuses to walk away, an eye that does not judge. Those small acts can hold a soul teetering on the brink. Daniel wipes his mouth with a napkin, tomato soup stains still clinging to his chin. Serena leans forward, gently wiping it away with the napkin's edge, an instinctive gesture, as if he were her own child. The boy does not flinch. He merely bows his head in quiet humility. That very silence, though, it becomes his unspoken thank you. Outside, the rain continues to fall, but inside Serena's heart, something settles into a gentle calm. Across the street, in the darkness illuminated by the neon glow of Lexington Diner, the sleek black Bentley sat motionless, like a predator in hiding. Inside, Raymond Holt remained perfectly still. His face betrayed no emotion, yet his cold gray eyes were fixed on the scene unfolding beyond the rain-smeared glass. In this humdrum setting, a shabby roadside diner, he saw his son Daniel eating with a stranger, and what he could not look away from was not the simple plate of sandwiches or bowl of soup, but Serena's gaze toward that child. Raymond Holt, 46 years old, was a man forged from ironclad principles. He did not believe in luck, nor in relying on emotion. Everything he possessed, from the billion-dollar Holt Dynamics empire to his standing in international finance, was built on absolute control and faith solely in efficiency. To him, softness was risk. Sentiment, if unchecked, was a fatal weakness. Yet now, on this rainy night in a forgotten corner of Baltimore, he sat transfixed, unable to tear his eyes from Serena Carter, dark-skinned, her hair tied back beneath a stained apron, as she tended to every small detail for Daniel. She did not know she was being watched. She did not know that each gesture, each smoothing of the blanket, each wipe of soup from Daniel's chin was being etched into the memory of a man who cared for nothing beyond profit and schedule. An urgent call from Japan awaited him, a call from major investors needing him to sign a multi-million-dollar contract. His wristwatch had already passed the hour of the appointment, yet Raymond had not touched his phone. He was calculating, not finances, but emotion, a task he rarely permitted himself to undertake. He saw Daniel as he had never seen him before. The boy sat erect, shoulders no longer shrugged in defense, eyes no longer darting with fear. His little legs swung under the table, unconsciously, a child truly living his age. That image, so simple, so ordinary, struck Raymond to his core. It was not an overwhelming emotion, but a silent realization that he had long forgotten something essential in his climb to the top, the normalcy of childhood. He lifted his phone, finally shattering the silence within the car's cabin. His voice was low, concise, unwavering, like every command that had once compelled hundreds of employees across his offices to spring to action. "Nora," he said, as his assistant answered. "Go to Lexington Diner. No need for business attire. I want you there in 20 minutes. There was a brief pause at the other end. Then he continued, his tone softer now, no longer the CEO giving orders, but a father witnessing something beyond his control. "Find everything you can about that woman." He offered no further explanation. He did not need to. In his eyes now, Serena Carter was no ordinary waitress. She had made his son smile. She had accomplished what money, schools, psychologists, and even he himself had failed to do all these years. She had made Daniel feel safe. Inside the diner, Serena knew nothing of the upheaval her actions were causing in a world far removed. All she knew was that before her sat a boy in need of care, in need of being seen, in need of a place to sit fully without cowering in fear. To her, this was no grand gesture. It was instinct, a kindness born from her own experiences of abandonment. Raymond squeezed the phone lightly in his hand. For the first time in a long while, he did not calculate what would be most advantageous. He simply stared through the rain-spattered glass and saw his son at peace. And Serena Carter, her hair soaked, her face weary after a long day, her gaze gentle without expectation, had stepped into his line of sight. Not through prominence, not through status, but through a single, simple act, giving a child a sense of belonging. 2 weeks have passed since that cold, rainy night, and Serena Carter has returned to her old routine. Mornings still begin with the smell of burnt coffee and streaked napkins smeared with pancake batter. Her life is still measured in hours spent behind the counter, in dealing with difficult customers, in the small change dropped into the tip jar. On the surface, nothing has changed, yet inside her, something has shifted. An undercurrent, barely breaking the surface, but enough to keep her mind from finding peace as it once did. Then, one Thursday morning, a thick envelope appeared on her doorstep. The heavy paper bore the embossed logo of Holt Dynamics, a name that alone commands respect in any city. In her hands, Serena held not only an invitation to an interview, but also a brief, handwritten letter, firm, concise, and weighty. The author was none other than Raymond Holt. She read it over and over, as if unwilling to believe it was real, not because she wanted it to be, but because she had grown accustomed to a world where favors are offered as a means of control, a syrupy way to buy compliance. She was exhausted by being seen only as the kind woman. That afternoon, Raymond Holt arrived in person. No entourage, no security detail, just a man dressed plainly, standing before the chipped door of her shabby apartment where Serena lives with her mother. He brought no lofty promises and no expensive gifts. He brought only himself, with a presence that could not be ignored. At first, Serena refused, firmly and unequivocally. She spoke with the coolness of one who knows how to build walls. She did not need a gift from a man who had once abandoned his own son in the rain. She did not wish to be part of any contrived penance wrapped in the guise of opportunity. But Raymond did not come to offer pity, nor to purchase gratitude. He looked at her, not as someone about to bestow charity, but as someone who genuinely valued what he had witnessed, a character that refused to back down when faced with adversity, a woman who dared to do what was right without needing to be in the spotlight. He spoke little, but his gaze alone made Serena understand that he saw not just her kindness, but her capability, her resolve, and her unshakable dignity. Serena remained silent long after he left. She stood by the window, her fingers tracing the edge of the thick envelope, her eyes fixed on the leaden sky. Inside her raged a quiet battle between trust and wariness. She was not used to people like Raymond Holt devoting their time to someone like her. She had been offered opportunities by rich men before, like bones tossed to stray dogs. But this was different. Not in his words, but in the way he looked at Daniel and at her. That night, she sat across from her mother at their old kitchen table, the familiar scent of clam chowder hanging in the air. But her mind was elsewhere. She thought of Daniel, and the look in his eyes when he tasted melted cheese for the first time. She thought of how a single child could transform a man if only someone had the patience to stay. Then she thought of herself. Perhaps it was time to give herself a chance. Not to be recognized, but to prove that goodness need not be confined to a corner diner. The next morning, Serena tied her hair into a neat bun, donned a crisp but worn shirt, and left her small apartment. She carried not blind faith, but a determined step, one that was not imploring but seeking to be heard. Within her still lingered doubt. Yet for the first time in a long while, Serena walked toward the unknown, with her calloused hands, but with her heart just a little more open. From the very first steps into the Holt Dynamics headquarters, Serena Carter sensed the thick atmosphere of suspicion. Sideways glances, awkward handshakes, unspoken questions. In a world built on polished resumes and prestigious degrees, the presence of a woman who had once stood behind the counter of a rundown diner was inexplicable. To them, she was an anomaly, and anomalies always came with a healthy dose of caution. Serena held no ill will toward them. She was used to entering rooms where everyone's eyes shifted away. But this time was different. She wasn't there to survive. She was there because she knew she carried something they lacked, the ability to see what they had long forgotten. Real human beings behind the numbers, souls behind the reports. Her first assignment was to join Raymond in presenting to the executive board on the company's long-term development strategy. Holt Dynamics stood at a crossroads: relocate its factory to the mainland to optimize costs, or keep it local to uphold its community commitment. The initial figures favored relocation. Yet Serena saw what the spreadsheets couldn't convey: families losing their livelihoods, towns abandoned to economic decay. She didn't argue with economic theory. She argued with real stories, with faces she had served in that corner diner, where many of the factory workers used to stop for lunch. Raymond allowed her to speak. In that moment, even in the cold boardroom, a silent shift began. Serena not only persuaded them, she reminded them of Holt Dynamics' core values: responsibility to the community. The decision to keep the factory not only preserved jobs, but also preserved the trust of an entire region. But recognition, when it comes, is never permanent. A few months later, a data breach rocked the company, sending stock prices into a tailspin. Whispers spread. All gazes turned back to Serena. She, with her blue-collar background, suddenly became the easiest target. The newcomer, the outsider, the one with no roots in that power structure. She did not react immediately. Serena never rushed into a storm. But this time she was not alone. Nora, Raymond's assistant, stood by her side. Two people, different in background and style, yet sharing a common thread: keen intuition and unshakable loyalty. They began to trace the trail, slowly and silently. Deleted emails, calls unrecorded in official logs, suspicious accounts appearing in the system. The final piece led them to an unexpected name: a senior director who always appeared calm and kind in meetings, but whose reputation masked calculated manipulation. When the truth was laid bare, Serena did not choose silence or to wait for someone else to speak on her behalf. She rose, evidence in hand, and presented before the board with an extraordinary calm. Not to vindicate herself, but to defend the truth. Raymond, sitting beside her that day, did more than listen. He stood and publicly declared his unwavering support for her, a conviction no one in that room could ignore. That moment did more than shift the company's trajectory. It changed how everyone saw Serena. She was no longer the girl from the little diner. She was no longer Raymond Holt's goodwill experiment. She had become an indispensable part of the company's strategic framework. She earned her rightful position through intelligence, integrity, and the ability to stand firm amid the quietest storms. But above all, she earned their trust, not because they were obliged to give it, but because they could not help but recognize it. In a world where people often measure worth by appearances and credentials, Serena Carter walked in and rewrote the rules, Not with words, but with actions. Not with titles, but with genuine character. Many years have passed since that cold, rainy night on Lexington Street, when Serena Carter, her hair tied back beneath a worn apron, guided a trembling boy in a wheelchair into the diner amid a winter storm. A small act, witnessed by no one, with no expectation of reward. Yet that silent moment opened an entirely different path for both her and that boy. Now, Serena stands in a grand auditorium, golden lights illuminating a stage adorned with flowers. Beside her is Daniel, a young man in his graduation gown, his eyes alight with pride, his heart still carrying the memory of that rainy night. No words need be spoken. Their shared, sincere glance says it all. That journey has come full circle. Serena Carter is now Vice President of Strategy at Holt Dynamics. From the woman who once worked late nights at a tiny diner, she has become the leader of community reinvestment programs, the face of a new generation of business people, those who measure value not only in profit, but in real impact on people's lives. Under her guidance, towns once abandoned now have scholarships, rebuilt factories, and renewed hope for a younger generation that once seemed destined to crumble. Serena never forgets where she came from. No high-powered boardroom or multi-million-dollar contract ever pulls her from her roots. On her desk sits a faded photograph, a shot of the Lexington diner on a winter's night, neon signs blurred behind rain-streaked glass. It serves as a reminder that what set her on this journey was not ambition, but a nameless act of kindness. One right thing done at the right moment, for no reason other than human compassion. When the ceremony ends, Daniel turns to her. His smile is no longer one of timid gratitude, but the steady gaze of a young man who understands. Sometimes, what saves us does not come from status or wealth, but from the steadfast presence of someone who believes we deserve rescue. Serena does not seek applause. She does not live to become a symbol. What she holds dear, and has carried throughout this journey, is a steadfast belief in the power of kindness. In a world that rushes ever faster, where people become mere numbers in a system, Serena chooses to preserve that gentle human touch because she knows it is the one thing that cannot be mechanized, replaced, or forgotten. And if there is one final message she wishes to share, it is for all Americans, people living in a nation built on dreams and sacrifice. Never underestimate the power of small acts. Never believe yourself too insignificant to make a difference, and never let kindness be overlooked in a noisy world. You may not hold power, you may not be wealthy or famous, but you can be the reason someone stands again. You can be a refuge on a cold, rainy night. You can be the beginning of a change the world never expected. If this story has touched your heart, share it with your loved ones across America. Send it to the friends you believe still cherish compassion. Subscribe to this channel because we are here not just to tell stories, but to remind each other that in this nation, goodness has never truly vanished. It simply needs to be seen.